Good evening. It is 5 p.m. I'm Rob Watton, the chair of the Public Safety Committee and Committee of the Whole, and I welcome you to tonight's meeting. City Clerk Dean, please make note of the council members present, Councilmember Cotton, Councilmember Christensen, and myself, as well as city staff in council chambers. With that, the very first item is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
I so motion. Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Cotton, second by Councilmember Christensen. Any discussion? Hearing none, we will accept the agenda as presented. Next, we move on to public comments. And this time will provide the time for residents and citizens to comment on items not on the agenda. We've established some ground rules. In recognition of our role as elected representatives of the residents of the city of Snoqualmie, it is our job to perform our duties in an efficient and orderly manner. Therefore, comments will be limited to 3 minutes. Please wait to be recognized by the chair. State your name and city of residence for the record. Please direct your comments to the council or this committee as a whole and not individual members. Please note that this is not a time to ask questions of the council, mayor, or staff, or to engage in debate. The council members here will listen quietly and respectfully to your concerns. Public comments during this portion of the meeting shall be limited to topics concerning current, future, or requested city projects, actions, programs, plans, and regulations. Comments not pertaining to these subject matters are not germane and may result in your comments being suspended. And last, please respect the decorum of these proceedings, as all due respect will be afforded to you. So with that, seeing that there is no one besides ourselves in the council chambers, would anyone online be interested in speaking? Please raise your hand, or if you're online on a phone line, press *9 to raise your hand to speak, and raising your hand signals to me that you have a comment, and then press *6 to mute and unmute. Are there any comments? Hearing none, I will deem the public comments section of tonight's meeting closed. So with that, we will now move on in the agenda. And that's the minutes from the meeting dated March 18th, 2024. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Christensen, seconded by Councilmember Cotton. Are there any comments or adjustments to the minutes as presented? Hearing none, we will accept the minutes as presented. Thank you. Next, I get the honor of calling upon Fire Chief Bailey to give us the community risk assessment and standard of coverage. Standard of coverage.
I'm just gonna bring up the share of the screen here so I can bring up presentation. Okay, all right. That's what. Okay. So, council, thanks for committee. Thanks for having me here tonight. What I wanted to do is go over our community risk assessment update, and this is part of our accreditation. and we'll go into it a little bit here, why we needed to update it. But this is something that I wanted to bring forward, show you what we changed, talk about, and then after the presentation, have a conversation about where you would like the information to go from here. I'll go over a little bit about what's needed for accreditation. So just to remind a little bit what this is the elements of accreditation is there's a couple pieces here. So it's standards of cover, which is basically the council approving our response times and our goals for how we're going to meet our needs for the department and getting to calls on a certain standard. We have the community risk assessment, which we're going to be talking about this evening, which tells you really looking at the analysis of your community, the risk of it, and then deciding using that to determine your response plans going forward. The strategic plan, we'll talk a little bit after this presentation in the next little segment on the agenda. And then self-assessment, and that's the performance indicators that we have to write to prove that we are, to be an accredited agency. There's over 200 different performance indicators that we have to write to. So that's kind of the cycle of what we talk about when we're talking about our accreditation. So again, tonight I'll be talking about the risk assessment. And really what that is the risk assessment is just an analysis of looking at both fire and non-fire hazards and risk in your community, taking into account factors that increase or decrease the risk, and then determining your response plans based on that. And then it helps you determine what your standards of cover would be. So what we did is, we looked at, you're supposed to update it every couple of years. We've changed it over the years since Chief Carrera first presented it back in 2017. And so that's what I want to do tonight is just kind of go over a little bit about what we have done. So we're talking about the community risk assessment. And really that's just looking at, it allows us to, look at the resources being dispatched and then kind of determine where we need to be. It's a little bit different in our city compared to other cities just because we are a one station, one unit response, as opposed to if you think about a bigger city, say Kirkland or Bellevue, where they have multiple stations, multiple response areas. So ours is a little skewed in that as we kind of look at it as one big area. So we're not necessarily trying to determine which areas of the huge response area you might need to have another station or something like that. So although we do look at the whole community and determine areas of risk, it's not as involved as if you were a bigger city, if you would. So when we determine what we're looking at is we look at our risk categories. We get caught up here. And so we came up with these 5, a point system. And so you give 1 point, we break the area of the city into different areas, and we'll talk about those areas here in a second. But really, you have 5 categories, and then you assign for each, you add the points together. And so looking from minimal risk all the way up to extreme risk, you could go anywhere from 1 to 5 points based on those categories. And we'll dive into each of those categories as we go along. So then you put them together. We look at population density, assessed value, building count, the economy of the area that we're looking at, and then if there's any critical infrastructures or target hazards. So we look at those 5 things, score each area from 1 to 5 on those things, and then put it all together in one big map to kind of show us where we need to focus on. So the first thing we did has to do with the planning zones. And I know it's a little hard to see on the screen here, but we'll go over it. So originally, when Chief Carrera created this back in 2017, he used quarter square mile area. We called them geocodes. It was a kind of like just squared across the city. It was something that was created by King County EMS, but he used those. And there was like 60 different one of those planning zones. And we determined through our first accreditation visit, that was way too many. So that we broke it down to where we just had 2 planning zones. So there was an urban and a rural. Basically, the urban was everything pretty much right in the main city, and then the rural was just kind of the stuff that was on the other side of the river and the Salish. Again, we kind of went too far, so we went from too many to too little. So now we kind of swung back to where we came up with a more and this is what I created, what is understandable for me going forward. So we created from that, we based 5 planning zones. So we came up with 5 different planning zones, And those are broken down just by some characteristics. I worked with Brendan from GIS to make this happen. But we have really two on the ridge, Ridge 1 and Ridge 2, and then the commercial area is carved out as the third one. So the area where the business park is, some of that in this middle is the third one. Downtown, we have the historic downtown, and then rural would be the area again that's kind of on the outskirts of the city, other side of the river, over by the Salish. So you can see on the map of the SOC, the CRA that was sent out to you, you can see those in better detail of what those are. Then looking at those, we decided to break it down even further, just so that it's easier to read, because as we know, the ridge is very different from downtown in how the plots are, how the houses are put together. And so if we looked at just those big planning areas, we needed to have a little bit smaller way to break it down. So we broke them down into what I called the RAS, which is just the residential zones. And so those are pretty much based on the planning department had predefined neighborhoods that they already had a layer for on GIS that they gave to me, and I used those. So you can see on the map there, each one is kind of broken down just so that we can see these different colors and see a little bit better detail of the neighborhoods or inside the planning zones. So that's what the map is there, is that showing you the different RAS. And then you'll hear as we go through, I'll keep referring to the RAS, the access zones. Okay, so to get into what this is so, again, we had 5 categories. The first one we looked at was population density. And then how we came up with that is we started with minimal risk and said inside that little RAS, anything from 0 to 3 would be minimal. And you can see there on the screen there, it goes all the way up to extreme risk. And we based those numbers on talking with Brendan at the city and kind of feeling out where a good break was to try and keep it consistent. So that's how we have it broken down for the population density. So if you look on the map there, again, I know it's kind of hard, but you can see that the green color is the lowest all the way up to the brown color, which is the highest. So when you're looking at population, you kind of see what you would expect. The highest populated areas in that bottom left-hand corner, and that's where we have the hospital, Panorama, a lot of the more densely packed neighborhoods up there off Jacobia. So that makes sense that that would be the highest population area. And then you can see a couple of the other ones are the neighborhoods that either have the mixed residential. So you have on the red there is where we're going to have the ones like the Woodland condos. And then over on the other side, on the back side, the other red is, again, where we have that kind of densely packed area off the back of McCullough in that area. We also, just to make it easier to read, we have it downtown too, where we just split up east and west so you can see it a little bit better. So this is downtown. You can see that the higher populated part of downtown is on this side of river. The lower is on the other side. And then obviously the rural is pretty low population there. So that just gives you an idea where the population is. The next one we looked at was building count. And again, we started at minimal and went all the way up to extreme based on how many property or how many buildings are inside that RAS area. It didn't matter whether it was commercial at this point, whether it was commercial or residential, and it wasn't counting detached garages or anything. It was counting actual residences or businesses. So that one you can see it kind of goes in the same area. Those two same areas are going to is our higher structure. And then some of the other areas, again, you'll see the similar areas, the outskirts of the ridge, some of the neighborhoods on the other side of the lake there by the golf course are some of the lower structures, some of the more tight neighborhoods up, again, off Jacobia and the backside there. Those are the higher red numbers. And then downtown, you can see downtown, it's just because of and one thing we kind of determined when we started looking at this again is that probably in the future, we're going to want to break downtown into, instead of having 2 areas, we're probably going to want the next version of this, we're probably going to break it down into 4 just to give a little bit better view of the downtown area. I think we left it a little bit too big for the RAS for downtown. The next one we looked at was assessed value. Again, broken down there from minimum to extreme risk. And this is just a total from the GIS layer that Brendan had. The hospital, the bottom left-hand corner, again, is our highest. You know, you still see it really kind of falls along each one of these. It makes sense as to why there are bigger areas. Some of the commercial area obviously is higher up there because of the assessed value of the commercial buildings, the business park. There's the downtown view of that. The next one, we looked at economy, and this was more just to kind of determine the residential from the business area. So we broke this one down into residential, then a mix of residential and retail, full retail, and then we went into like light industry, warehouse, and large employer distributor. So that was covering some of the areas up on the ridge, the business park. There's the map we used of those. For the most part, the ridge is all green until you get to the commercial areas where we have everything around center, the end of Jacoby where the hospital is, and then down at the very bottom is because of the Better Waste complex where we have all those businesses there across from the fire station. And then downtown, as you expect, the main two areas are going to be in the higher just because of the businesses along railroad. The last one we looked at for other measurements, the fifth is critical infrastructure and target hazards. And that just has to do with what is inside each one of those RAS. Some of the critical ones are the city buildings that are critical for infrastructure. Also has the schools included in that, the hospital, public works facility, the PSE plant down at the falls. So if you had a critical infrastructure inside that area, you'd get an extra point for that. Or we also considered the target hazard of along the river there. If the planning zone was along the river, they got an extra point for having that target hazard, our biggest target hazard of the river. So when you put it all together, I know it's kind of hard there, you're not gonna be able to see, but this is just an example of how we put it all together based on the neighborhood and how I scored across, and we got a final score for each one of those planning areas. And that's what was given with this map right here. So this gives us the overall score of each different one of these areas. Again, you can see that the highest is where the hospital is. So these are our areas focused when you look at the city overall, looking at those 5 things, that's where the highest risk would be. Not saying that that's where we're going to have the most amount of our calls, but when you look at probability, that's the area that we want to focus on as our highest risk area. So we take that. There's the downtown area with, and again, that goes back to, yeah, it's not as downtown isn't as populated as the ridge, but we have a lot of the buildings downtown, the commercial area through the railroad. That's what brought the downtown area up a little bit. Okay, so besides the response area going through those 5 critical factors, we also looked at overall response. And this graph just goes to show you, and I know you've seen this from our reports that we do from our accreditation. This just goes over our call volume over the last 5 years. You know, starting out there at 1202, ending up last year at 1572. The biggest dip there is during COVID. Call volume went down, and then we steadily increased after that up to 1611 and 22. And then we went down, you know, like 30, 40 calls to the last year. Overall, statistically, not a real big difference, but we did go down a little bit last year in our call volume. The next graph here just shows, again, because we're looking not only is it call volume, but the type of instances we have, the type of incidents. And so this graph just kind of shows, you know, what we already know is that we have a very low instance of fire. That's at the very bottom there. The green is the fire responses or fire-related response. The biggest overall is our EMS calls, and that's the blue there in the center, the lighter blue. And then we have some the hazardous calls, and those have to do with smoke investigations, maybe a gas spill, CO monitors, things like that are going to be considered in your hazardous type. Service is the next one above that, above the yellow. And you can see it kind of grew a little bit in our last couple of years. And that is all the false alarm calls, the automatic fire alarms. That's where a lot of the service ones go. And then the last 2 there is good intent. And, oh, I'm sorry, the false calls were broken out separately at the top there, the actual false calls. The service calls is more People calling because their smoke detector is going off and it's beeping and they're not sure how to shut it off. Lost kids, things like that are going to be your general service smoke in the area. So that's just a graph that again shows what type of call we go on. So this is included in the CRA. The last thing we look at when we look at our risk assessment is where the calls are located. And we did it a little bit differently just because of how small our fire volume is. So we looked at 5 years. When we looked at fire, hazardous, and rescue, we looked at 5 years just to get a little bit better picture. The bigger call volume is in the ALS and the BLS. So when we get to those maps, you'll see those were a 3-year, just so that it wasn't, we could really get a good view of it. It wasn't too crowded by a large number. So for fire calls, you can see kind of, again, where you would expect where our higher concentration of population is. So you can see the red there is the upper portion of Ridge 2 there along Jacobia, and then through the center area, the red is the main business area where we had a lot of our calls. Downtown, right through, most of our calls are going to be right there along 202. It has to do a lot with visitors, things like that. And then across the street, down further, the red you see there is going to be where we have some work in the older area of town. That's kind of right around the Meadowbrook Bridge, the high school. We had a couple fires down in that area. So these are really just representative of where we had our fire calls. The next one here is BLS. Again, you expect, like I said, you can start to see the little left, the bottom left. That's where the hospital, where we get a lot of BLS calls there in Panorama. But otherwise, it's kind of spread around. The one green dot you see off to the far left, that's Echo Glen. So that's why you start to see a little bit kind of populating there is the BLS calls that we go up to Echo Glen. Here's the ALS calls. The red dot's right squarely on top of the hospital because we do a lot of ALS calls out of the hospital where they're transporting patients out of the hospital. And then the other one's back down in the downtown core area. Going to our rescue calls, the red dots, the Salish. Most of our rescue calls, and we're talking about rescue, we mean trail rescue, going on the trail. So the red dots has to do with the calls on the trail from the upper Salish down to the lower parking lot at the falls. And then some of the areas when you get out to like where that other to the far where Meadowbrook is, Meadowbrook, and where the bridge is, we get a lot of calls kind of out in the dog park area and the trails out there. So that's why you see that other kind of big green yellow circle in that area. And then lastly, the hazardous is kind of spread all around the city. Like the higher concentrations have to be where we have some of the apartment complexes. You can see there, the big red one there in the center is where we have some of the condos off of Fairway. You see a lot of calls in there with CO monitoring calls, alarms, things like that. And then down in the business park is where you see some of the other high concentrations. And the one to the bottom kind of left, that red circle has to do with that is where we have the other mixed use, the woodland apartments or the condos. So that's just kind of a snapshot of what we changed in our CRA. And so how we look at it is, again, we start out by looking at the community risk, and that was the point system that I put together to help us kind of determine the probability of where our calls are going to be. We identify the response by the risk, by the type of call we respond to. And then the next one is we look at the critical task. So how many people we need to deal with some of these type of calls, which we'll show you an example on the next page. Then we build a response plan, and then that's how it's just the process that how we use this community risk assessment as we build our response plans for the city. So here's just an example of the fire risk response levels. We have this set up for, if you look through the document, you'll see this set up for each type of call, but I just used one example here of the fire call. So based on having a fire in the city, we have 4 different types there. Low risk would be a car fire, vegetation, dumpster, some kind of single response. The next one up, a medium, would be an outbuilding, some of the sprinkler alarms, the fire alarms. The high risk would be a single family structure fire, and extreme risk would be a fire in like a multi-story, multi-family commercial building. So then we use those graphs to tell us how many people we need for each type of call. That's how we build our response plans and our effective response force. For the bottom one, the low risk, you just need 1 engine, so that's 3. The medium risk, you start adding some command, some investigation pieces to it, so it bumps it up to 6. And then the number you've heard us talk about before, the high risk and the extreme risk is up to 17. That's where we need to pull in people from outside the city, outside, that's, outside fire departments to help us meet that 17 effective response force. And that's the number that's used in the tables at the back of the CRA, where it talks about our response times, our turnout times, how long it takes to get the effective response force on there, to get all those units on scene. That's what makes up those tables that's at the back of the document. So that's really just kind of a quick overview. Again, that just breaks out, that screen there just tells us, of that 17, where does it come from? It comes from 3 on the engine, 3 engines, 1 ladder. It just gives us the type of units that are responding. So that's just kind of a quick overview of what we changed in our CRA for this round. Again, a lot of it was, trial and error over the first one, kind of seeing what works for the city, also changing it to what works for me so that I understand it, because, Chief Carrera created it before. Now I'm responsible for it, so I wanted to make it what I could understand and what I could follow, and that's kind of where we landed on the 5 different planning zones and looking at the city. And now going forward, now that we have those 5 planning zones established, we'll be able to drill a little bit down each more into those planning zones to look at, okay, what were our response time to this zone? What was our response time to this zone? So that's kind of the plan as to where we're going in the future. Now that we have this document created with the different zones that make a little bit more sense than the 1 or 2 that we used before. I know I threw a lot of information out to you. I probably should have stopped and asked if there's any questions along the way, but is there anything that didn't make sense of how we got to this point? Or are there any questions I can answer at this point?
Let me ask that of the committee members. Any questions?
No, I think it was great, because it already drills down to some of the high risk and extreme risk areas and where the responses are going to. So that's awesome.
And the biggest thing I want to identify too is, now that we have these new planning zones, is I want to spend the next 5 years of our accreditation really looking at these zones, talking about, as we talk about the future of the fire department, we're looking down the road, is the fire station the best place? Potentially, are we going to want to maybe see about it, down the road in the future planning? Does it make sense to have another satellite station somewhere because of the response times? That, further part of the ridge is the furthest response out. These are things that we'll be able to use these planning zones. As you have questions about the fire department or response types, staffing, things like that, we can go back to these planning zones to help really kind of flesh out the data for us, to show a little bit better picture of where our volumes are. And eventually we're going to get to the point, I'm working with the data person with Bellevue, who's also accredited, is we're going to be able to look at those planning zones on a quarterly basis or a monthly basis, instead of waiting for, we do those numbers once a year, all our response times, that's done once a year. We're going to look at it more on a monthly or quarterly basis to have a little bit better idea. These are more things that I'm starting to figure out as I'm now responsible for the risk analysis part of the accreditation process.
Councilmember Christensen, do you have any follow-up questions or comments?
I don't think I have any follow-up questions at this point. I think that it's a really well done document. I thought that it was very helpful to go through, and I think it'll be wonderful as we see the data come in to see how it can be used going forward. And then it's my understanding then that this will go and it'll be reviewed by the folks from the accreditation, and so they'll weigh in on it as well. Will we see another copy once they do weigh in with their comments, or is this kind of just going to be passed through to council, or I guess what are the next steps?
That's the kind of the next steps, and then I'll talk about that here. So first of all, you're asking about the accreditation. So yes, what we're going to do is I'm going to take this document. We're going to make some copies for the accreditation team to have while they're out here. They're going to review it. If they have questions, if they have concerns, if we end up updating it from that, then we'll come back out with a final copy, if you would, that would be published, that we'd be able to put on the website, and would be the published final version. Don't want to necessarily do that yet until they've had a chance to review it. But that kind of leads to my next question, is where the Public Safety Committee would like us to go with this, because I see there's a couple different options. First of all, because we view this as an update. It's not the whole, we didn't change our response times, our response standards, the standards of cover portion of the document. So according to accreditation, we do not have to have a full approval from the council of the document because we haven't changed that piece of it. We just tweaked our planning zone. So really, I see a couple different options where we could go with this. One is, if you would like, I could do this presentation in front of the full council. You could also decide that you want to have the document approved by the full council. We could take the full document to the council, make it an agenda bill, and have it approved. Or we could just present it here at the Public Safety Committee. We'd have the accreditation. If there are anything that comes out, if we make any major changes, we can always bring it back to you, decide if you want to. But really, it's up to the Public Safety Committee if you think it needs to go to the full council. But according to accreditation, presenting it here is enough for that. It's just a matter of what you would like us to do at this point, to if you want us to move it forward to the council as a whole, or if we're just going to talk about it here in the public safety realm.
I think is my take on this. First of all, I want to thank you for doing this, and it gives me a sense of peace with what has evolved over time with the department. I think it's really important to stress the response time because it's remarkable. And we do know that, you know, there's a couple hot spots in SR2 where it's a little bit far reaching and time is very critical. But what I would like to see is that this be part of the public safety report and not an agenda bill, just for full transparency. And it's a chance for the chief to show the good work of the station, and we're very grateful for having an independent and self-contained fire department.
And what after the credit, we're going to talk about it in the next agenda item. But after the accreditation group comes out, I can always come back to the public safety. You know, if they recommended some changes, or maybe they might even recommend that they do want it to go in front of the full council. We can wait till after that visit, and then I can bring it back to you to see if there's anything we need to talk about. But I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think it's necessarily ready that we would need to show it to the council before they get here. I think it's really just probably my recommendation would be that we wait until after the site visit, and then if there's anything that comes out of the site visit, I can always come back to the Public Safety Committee, give them their findings, and if we decide that before the commission, if we want to do, like if they come back and say, okay, we need the full council to approve it, there'll be plenty of time to get that done before our commission hearing in August, because really the team comes out and they give us a list of recommendations, and we try to, before you get in front of the commission, you try to pick off as many of those recommendations as you can. And if they come back with a recommendation from their site visit, as in, hey, this needs to be approved by the full council, that'd be an easy one that we'd be able to pick off the list to show the commission that we are working towards what they said. And like I said, I can bring it back if there is any of those recommendations. I can bring it back after the site visit, and we can readdress it then if you'd like.
Okay, very well. Councilmember Cotton.
I think, yeah, after the accreditation visit, which is in a few weeks, isn't it? Okay. But I do think that, yeah, once things are kind of honed, whether it's presented at council or we just distribute the information, I think the other council members would find it extremely informative. Mm-hmm. And so I think we should all be able to access that. So whatever, the chief is comfortable with.
Okay, very well. So is that the consensus then? Wait until after the accreditation response is received? Councilmember Christensen.
Yeah, I think I would lean towards just letting them know that we received this update, that it was fantastic, that if they want to reach out for copies of it, then they can do that, and otherwise circle back once it's completed.
Okay. Very well.
And I thought I had it on the agenda, but I don't. We'll just talk about it real quick. The site visit is scheduled. I think I mentioned before, it's the 21st through the 25th. I have Captain Fouts is working on the schedule right now. There is going to be a point probably near the end of the visit where the out briefing, where they tell us what they found and all the recommendations, where we'd be inviting members of the council, members of the administration that would want to come. and see that usually that happens on the Thursday, maybe either the Wednesday afternoon of the visit or the Thursday morning before they leave town. So we'll be in contact with you as they're still working on building the schedule. It's kind of up to the team what they want the schedule to look like. We haven't gotten the full schedule from the accreditation team that's coming out. As we get that, we'll reach out to to you all as like I said, if there's a point where we might want to have a meeting, if they want to speak with the council, with the public safety committee, not the full council, or for the out briefing meeting, we'll make sure that we keep you aware of that schedule. But just on the face of it, I'm guessing it's either going to be Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening. That's the April 24th, maybe. I'd have to look at the calendar, whatever that week of that Wednesday, or it's going to be early in the morning on Thursday before they leave town. It's going to be that out briefing. But it will also be available probably on Zoom too, where people can watch in as opposed to being there in person. But we'll let you know is that they're going to be on site starting Sunday, and then they'll be here for 3 full days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and they really just kind of set up meetings as to different people that they want to talk to based on our documents that we turned in. Okay. So once I get that full schedule, I'll let you know if there's any interaction they want to have with the public safety committee. It's kind of up to the team. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you very much. You have another item.
I do. I have more.
Fabulous.
Let me go ahead and turn that off so I'm not sharing my screen there. The next one I had on there is I just want to give a couple updates about the strategic plan. We'll talk about that one first. We've gone back and forth a couple things, as part of the public safety committee, we did that, the little one to kind of get us through with accreditation. We've done some more work since then with the accreditation team as to what they need to see. And where we are now is in talking with the administration, it wasn't looking like the city was going to be able to have time to do a full citywide strategic plan in 24. There's some pieces that still need to happen with the comp plan. So we needed to move ahead with our own fire department plan because we had to get that done. And that's going to be a recommendation. I'm positive that's going to come out of our accreditation visit is that our strategic plan is too old. So what we needed to move to get something on the books before our hearing in front of the commission. So we reached out to a vendor and got them on the calendar, got the approval from the administration to have a vendor come in and do it for us. It's the same thing we did with the last one, a third party to run it for us. We decided to go with the CPSE. So the people, the Center for Public Safety Excellence, the ones that give us the accreditation, they have an arm of that group that actually goes out and does strategic plans. So we figured that was, not only was it the most, it was the more cost-effective version. We figured that was because we knew it was going to be a recommendation for us that we were going to need to redo another strategic plan. We figured since we weren't going to have the plan completed by the time we go in front of the commission in August, if we use the group that they sponsor, they'll know it's being done right. So we figured that would give us a little extra oomph, the fact that we haven't done it yet. So that's what we've done is we've contracted with them. And they had a pretty tight schedule, so we had to kind of fit it in with our schedule. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to put it out there for potential dates because they have a pretty tight window. But we do have it set up for July 22nd through 25th. So it's going to start out with on the 22nd and on site. And you were part of the last one, I believe. I don't know if you were part of it. Councilmember Potts was part of the fire department.
Yeah.
But what it's going to be is it's going to be an evening meeting on the 22nd, which will be part of we're going to work through and invite people from the community to come in and do a survey and provide their input. So that's going to happen on the evening of the 22nd. And then following that, there'll be 3 full days of in the station meeting with the internal stakeholders for the strategic plan. As we build out the schedule, I'll keep you advised of it, but I just wanted to at least let you know what the dates were so you can get it on your calendars. And if we are approved by the site visit to go to the commission, that's going to happen the first week of August. So we'll be, just like I said, they're going to give us some, we know there's going to be some recommendations that come out of their visit, the main one being strategic plan. We'll be able to go in front of the commission and say, we had our visit, we had our thing, the first draft, we're actually going to get right before we go to the commission. So I think that's going to go a big way to say, hey, this is the draft plan. We do have a draft plan, and we're moving forward with it. So the timelines are going to be, we'll have a draft plan by the 1st of August, and then we'll have a month or so to respond to the draft, and then it'll go probably in front of the full council for approval September, October range. So I just kind of wanted to give you an update on where we're going with that, because I know we've kind of been back and forth on what's going to work because our timelines, and I wanted to get those dates out to you, that they're going to be on site for the, and we'll get more information as it comes as to, do you have to be there for all 3? Can you be there just for one of the days? I'll get that information as we go. But again, unfortunately, I wasn't able to provide some potential dates because I knew I had to get it in before the commission, and that was the earliest I could get it here. Was that week, and that was the same with another. We looked at 2 different vendors, and the other vendor, they were even further out. So this one made the most sense.
All right, excellent. Any questions or comments? Okay, very well. Thank you very much. Yes,
it's kind of tied together. I think on the agenda with that one was the deputy chief interviews.
Oh yes, please.
So the position's been advertised. It's going to close April 15th. But what I wanted to bring in front of the council is for the interviews. So we haven't scheduled. We obviously we don't know how many candidates we're going to have yet, but we're going to have interviews on panel interviews on May 6th, and then the final chief interview with me will be on May 7th. And I was trying to get a cross section of different people in the city and the organization. So my plan is to have a volunteer on the panel, a firefighter, an officer, a member from the union, and then another deputy chief from the area. And then I also wanted to have one more person, representative of the council. And so that's what I wanted to come to the public safety council to see if there was, to put it out to see if there was anybody on the council, the public safety committee, that was able to be free on May 6th that would be interested in being part of the, it's probably going to be a day long. We won't know for sure the times until we know how many candidates we're going to interview, but it's going to probably be, I'm guessing it's going to be a full day from probably 8 to 5. So I just wanted to put that out there to the group to decide if there's anybody that was available or how you wanted to do it. And if not, we'd be able to I'll be able to fill out the interview panel, but I wanted to offer the public safety committee a chance to sit on the interviews for the deputy chief.
Okay, excellent. With that, I'm going to turn to my 2 colleagues and ask if either one of them would be available. It's a Monday, May 6th. Councilmember Cotton?
Potentially would be available all day. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. There you go. Okay, thank you.
I will send out, I'll give it to Kim. She'll send out calendar invites at least to save the date. And then as it gets closer, when we have an idea of candidates and time, we'll keep you advised. But my guess is hopefully we'll have enough candidates that it's probably going to be an all day. You know, if we're interviewing 6 to 8, it's going to be an all day type of affair. But I'll give her your name, and then she'll put it on your calendar as a placeholder, and then we'll keep you updated as we go along in the process with how many we have.
Okay, good.
Thank you. Excellent job. All right. Well, we are coming down to the end of our 45 minutes. Items for future discussion. Council members, Mayor Ross, Mr. Chambliss, do you have anything that you'd like to make sure that maybe on that list of priorities that you want to elevate in the future? You can say them now, or you can just let us know and we'll make sure to include that in our future discussions. Right.
Not right now. It's kind of calm before the storm. We're finalizing the budget calendar.
Okay.
And it's boom, 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 boom,
okay.
boom, boom, boom.
You got enough.
So,
you got enough on the plate. Okay, sounds good.
Get ready. Here it comes.
That's fabulous. All right. With that, I will call for adjournment. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Second?
Second.
It's been moved by Councilmember Cotton, second by Councilmember Christensen. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. We are adjourned at 5:44 p.m. Thank you.